Welcome to the Amazing Grace Talk podcast. Conversations that explore how God has pursued those He has made in His image. My wife and host, Erika Seamayer-Williamson, is on a journey to meet everyday people who have experienced a radical encounter with the divine presence of unconditional love. These are the stories that remind us why God's grace is amazing.
Hello again, everyone. I'm Erika Seamayer-Williamson, founder of Amazing Grace Retreats, which are weekend getaways in beautiful locations such as the Black Hills of South Dakota, the beaches of Florida, and right here in my home state of Texas. I'll share more about the retreats at the end of the podcast, but let's jump right into today's content of this episode of Amazing Grace Talk. Today, my topic is a collision with the cross, and my guest today is Alvin Sims. Hey, Alvin, how are you today?
I'm good, Erika. How are you?
Doing good. So first, before we jump into this awesome godly story, I want to tell a little bit how we know each other. Alvin's actually known me since I was a little girl. I think I was in elementary, probably.
Thanks a lot.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably second grade or something, only because he was best friends with my godmother's son. And my godmother, who's my mom's best friend, and so we go way back. Yeah.
Probably one of the first experiences I'd had on a horse, too. I don't know if you want to talk about that little Shetland pony that was supposed to have been calm that ran me into a barbed wire fence bareback.
Well, you decided to hop on and thought it would be, hey, let's show off everybody on the Shetland pony.
Yeah, it was great.
Well, fast forward all these years, now Alvin is going to be my husband and my family. He already feels like family, has been for years, but our youngest son, Dylan, is getting married to his youngest daughter, Savannah, and a little over a year, next October, and that's going to tie us together as family. So this is a really special time to have you here today and to get to share your story, because I learned about your story, I guess, a couple of years ago when I saw your testimony on at the Cowboy Church, and I'd heard about it and I watched it. I have shared it with a lot of people since because it's so impactful, and I know it's really close to your heart of what God did for you in your life. So I know you were a police officer for over 25 years. Can you go back and tell us how that began?
Yeah, would love to. Thanks for having me. As a police officer, I kind of had some police in the family. Mm-hmm. So even though I started out outside police environment when I first graduated high school and putting myself through college, I landed a different job, outside sales rep, loved it, traveled. And then they wanted to move me to Atlanta, Georgia. I was going through a divorce at the time. I had a 2-year-old daughter. Wasn't about to leave my daughter in Texas. So I wound up, getting into the police work. Spent an amazing first time around 22 years in it.
Wow.
And tried to take notice of what was going on inside my house as opposed to outside the house.
Okay. And
man, did we have some dysfunction and chaos going on. So because of some of that, including, my wife and I, really, really strained marriage.
Mm-hmm. You'd been married how long had you been married to Rhonda at that time?
About 22 years.
22 years.
Yeah, because we got married about the time, 24 years.
Okay.
At the same time I started law enforcement.
Things were you were a little bit, loved your job a little too much, or?
Way too much.
You were good at it.
I was consumed at it. Yeah, I was pretty decorated. Mm-hmm. I took pride in that.
Yeah.
13 medals on my chest. Some of those I had 8 of.
Wow.
So, I ate, slept, and drank police work to a fault. I was up there for a while. We had a couple of SWAT teams running. I was one of the team leaders. So we were getting called out quite often, working in conjunction with the Drug Enforcement Administration. Mm-hmm. And, there was one year we did 258 tactical operations in 1 year. And so as a team leader, back then we didn't have cell phones. So when your pager went off and you're a team leader, we had to go. So
you had to go.
Yeah. And, that caused some issues. Obviously, I'm sure the wife and daughters at certain times were concerned, but it just, it was just extremely time consuming. When I wasn't working the streets or out on those type scenarios, I was in a uniform, working part-time jobs, trying to make some extra money.
Yeah.
And so wasn't home too much. Wasn't much of a father, wasn't much of a husband.
Well,
so
I can understand that and understand you wanting to be committed to your job. And I mean, that's definitely honorable. But I think where that collision with the cross came is probably, I think when we've talked about in the past, it's when you decided to retire to see what you could do about your marriage and your family life. Is that right? I mean, you thought, well, let's try something different.
Yeah, I made a bunch of other knuckleheaded decisions in the past and decided, it's about time that, we had a 20-year retirement now. So I stepped out after 22 years and tried to start focusing on family. I also, outside of that, not to get off on a rabbit trail, but, my last probably 7 years from 87 to 95, I also rodeoed a little bit, a little Texas circuit.
Did you?
Yeah, won a few state titles.
Wow.
I'm proud of, but
yeah,
so you compile that with the work and the part-time jobs, and then some of the weekends when you're gone, chasing wild animals and whatnot. It doesn't mix too good for a family environment. So I decided to step back, retire after 22 years, and then that's when I realized I had a super big problem. You can only play so much golf, right? And lose so many golf balls because I'm not that good. Not as good as your husband, obviously. but I started going through an identity crisis. I couldn't even conceptualize what was in store for me when the day I walked in and, announced my retirement. So, I started going through this identity crisis. I got where I wasn't eating at all. I'd probably lost 20 pounds in the first couple of weeks. Well, I knew who this guy was in this blue uniform, right? Well, it kind of looked like a little Spanish general with all the medals on my chest.
Yeah.
But I sure didn't know who Alvin Sims was outside that uniform anymore without that badge. So horrific couple of weeks. And one day out of the blue, I've arrested some pretty bad guys, had a couple of threats in the past of coming after you when I get out of the penitentiary kind of stuff with some of the people I've dealt with. So I wasn't paranoid, right? I mean, deal with me all day long, but just don't mess with my family.
Right.
So I had a couple of different weapons stashed throughout the house and had one on top of my kitchen cabinets that didn't quite go all the way to the ceiling. And just out of the blue, I thought to myself, I need to get that gun off the top of that cabinet and put it in your bedroom. Just totally out of the blue. So the minute I reached up on the cabinet and took, control of that weapon in my hand, I started saying to myself, maybe this is your way out, right? And I started getting really excited about it, man. And I also, it's not funny, but I also want to tell the people that, here I'm a 6'1", 250-pound guy that's scared of flu shots, right? So here I've got this gun in my hand. And then I've also been in a uniform inside those homes to where I've seen just the horrible crime scenes of somebody doing something similar, right? Taking their own life. And I thought to myself as I worked those crime scenes, even if you hate your family, how do you leave this mess behind for them to find?
Yeah.
And then I find myself in this exact position. Through a thought process, wound up laying down on my bed. My wife has all, you ladies always have fancy comforters and about 100 pillows, decorative pillows on the bed.
That's right.
So our bed had been made and a number of pillows on it. So I just laid on top of it and I had the .40 caliber handgun in my right hand and brought myself up on the pillows. And my gun in my hand was kind of off to the right side of my right thigh. And as I continued to, I wouldn't even say weigh pros against cons because there wasn't any cons coming into my thought process. It was just, man, this is your way out. And I was excited, right? So I'm sitting there stewing about it. And at that time, my youngest daughter, Savannah, who is engaged to your son, Dylan, was 10. And the foot of my bed faced the door to my bedroom so I could see the door. And as I'm laying there doing all this, my daughter, Savannah, walks to my threshold of my door to my bedroom, and she says, "Dad, what are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing, sweetheart." She couldn't see the gun. I wasn't worried about that. She goes, "Yes, you are. What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing, sweetheart." "Get up then." Just really adamant, right?
Yeah.
And she turns and she starts walking back through the den and over to the left towards the hallway to get to her bedroom. And so when when she was out of sight, I stuck the gun up under the pillows to my right. I got up out of the bed, walked through the house, went back to her bedroom, calling her name. She wasn't there. And at the time, we lived on a couple acres, had some horses in the back, and, I figured she's out back messing with the horses or jumping on a trampoline. And so I started to go out of the back door, coming out of my breakfast nook kitchen area there to the back patio, get back there, and the minute my hand hit the doorknob, I heard, son, it's a weekday, 10 o'clock in the morning, quit looking for, your daughter. She's not here, right? She's in school. Talk about collision with the cross, right? My past has always been, and it's kind of sad because my mom brought us up in church, but it was one of those forced kind of issues, right? Yeah. I wasn't atheist, but I was definitely agnostic, right? Some things that didn't help me was I was that cop and spent a lot of time investigating crime. So, you either have evidence or you don't. Yeah. And for me, when you talk about scripture and evidence of, is heaven and hell real? And I didn't have that evidence to satisfy my decision. And prior to this experience, I'd never gone seeking it, right? So, not so much going to church at all throughout my marriage until all of this hit. And then because I had rodeoed, right, for a few years, I heard about this Cowboy Church movement. Yeah. Right? That all started over a few guys throwing some ropes, chasing some cows, team roping, and they all got together and started doing some little 15, 20-minute sermons in between, and it's developed into an unbelievable movement. I'm super happy about our church. It's one of the motherships for the Cowboy Church movement, the Ellis County Cowboy Church of Ellis County here, and just absolutely love it. So, I told my wife, we'd been married a while then, absolutely hated each other probably, in all honesty. We wanted a divorce. We couldn't afford to, file for it. Right. So, and then, when you're trying to raise some teenage gals that sometimes are defiant, right, and not all decisions you feel as a police officer or as a father are the right decisions. There was a lot of dysfunction there and chaos. So, thank God my wife agreed to go to church with us. And the first Sunday I went into Cowboy Church there, we sat in the back. It's a very large, congregation, and we sat in the back, and Pastors Gary Morgan, and Gary was preaching that Sunday, and I felt so odd. I mean, I was ducking and diving in the back row, right?
Were you?
I felt like he had my house audio and video taped.
You were being convicted, tapped on the shoulder like, are you talking about me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is he looking at me? I'm trying to dodge the people in front of me. And when I move, he seems to move on the stage so he can kind of see me hiding behind that head in front of him. So, it was crazy. Definitely got something out of it. I felt like I came out of there with two black eyes, right? And this guy's got me pegged. And there was probably 1,000 people there at this sermon, right? So, service. So, we walked out. Of course, things are still kind of dysfunctional at the house, right? Yeah. I mean, but our church also at the time had a guy by the name of Rick McKenzie that had given up probably a 6-digit-a-year job in counseling and gone to work for our church. So Rick was doing a lot of counseling at our church for folks like us and didn't charge a dime, right? The church didn't charge us. It was just out of love. So it took some counseling with Rick, with my wife and I, eventually. So I kind of skipped forward to that. So going back, we leave out, and I go, man, I don't know about you, but this guy's got me figured out, I think. It's kind of weird. But so we go back a second week, right? And we sat in a different spot on the back.
You were trying to avoid him.
Yeah, all the way across the other side. I'm thinking, he ain't going to find me this week. A lot of hats. I'm wearing a hat, cowboy hat. Well, I'll be daggum if I don't think he finds me, man. And it's a totally different topic, sermon. Man,
you had you pegged again.
Yeah, I mean, he was, I feel like, I was getting beat up by Mike Tyson or something, man. So once again, it was unbelievable. Yeah. And then, throughout this 3-week session, I've also got a sister that's a couple of years older than me that's just a warrior. Okay. Right. So Brenda was, giving me books to read. T.D. Jakes, Rick Warren. I was reading scripture, right? She was praying for me. And so I was doing a lot of reading. With a doubtful heart, I was doing a lot of reading.
Yeah.
And also praying multiple times a day. And the gist of those prayers were, Erika, were pretty much, God, I don't know if you exist or not, but if you do, my butt's in a pickle.
Mm-hmm.
Our family's kind of falling apart. It's coming unraveled. And I could use some help, right?
Wow.
And it was repeated. I'd say that, and pretty much those words verbatim, several times, most days, along with sitting down. And I didn't spend all day reading, but I'd go back to one of the books or scripture every so often and throughout the day and do the same. So, we wind up going to this Cowboy Church a couple of weeks. He beats me up every time I go in. He's, we're still talking about how odd it is. And then the third week, after the second week, we walk out and I tell my wife, I said, I love this church. I'd love to join it. And she said, well, we said we were going to shop around, right? This is the only church we've been to. I said, okay. So next Sunday was getting close, and I said, I'd really like to go back down and see the Cowboy Church. And she agreed. And this time I didn't sit quite far in the back. I kind of sat in the middle this time. So, again, my point being, right, there's a lot of humor in that, but there's a lot of truth in it, too.
Sure.
Same thing. Brother Gary Morgan, man, anyway.
You found yourself listening, like you felt convicted, but then at this point, you're like, maybe there's something to this that I need to be listening to.
Yeah, here's a guy I've never met, doesn't know me from Adam, doesn't know my situation, and he's just preaching God's word straight from the book. He doesn't bend it. There's worldly churches, I think, out here that exist today, and then there's good Bible-based churches and preachers that tell it like it is, and he may offend some folks, but guess what? It's
the truth.
Yeah, so as hard as some of that may be to some of us, man, he was nailing me. So when we walked out the third week, I didn't even say a word to my wife, Rhonda. She said, I think you're right. I think this is home. So we wound up joining the church, and that's when we started all the counseling stuff. But, we pulled our 16-and-a-half-year-old daughter, Chelsea, into some of those, and obviously it took all of us, right? Even my 10-year-old Savannah,
right,
as a family unit. So a lot of times it was just Brother Rick talking to Rhonda and I. Sometimes maybe it was just me. Sometimes maybe just her, and then we pulled in the family unit. But I say that to say it all led to me wanting to continue to stay plugged up and plugged in, right? Iron sharpens iron. So, I continue to read, and then when I experienced this that day with touching that doorknob, and I hear saying, "Son, your daughter's in school. Quit looking for her." I kind of got hit right between the eyes with that evidence that I needed, that all of this exists, right? There's a heaven and there's hell and there's a God, and he answers prayer. I didn't understand, Erika, for the longest, why me? Because, I've known some folks in law enforcement that's taken their life. It's got a high suicide rate. And, I never understood why me. And I can never express how overwhelming that conviction to do it was, right? If I'm scared of a needle, I'm terribly excited to swallow a .40 caliber bullet. It just goes to show you how convincing Satan can be.
I was going to say, Satan makes things almost euphoric at times. Like, this is real. I've had an experience like that in my life where, I really thought, I know what you're saying. It wasn't that same situation, but what was going on is I felt completely like I was in the right and it was wrong. I was in the right, and it was almost this crazy euphoric feeling, and it was all Satan, and it was just tempting and tempting. So I can understand that feeling of where you were at that point and what you were thinking, that, hey, I'm actually excited because this is a way out. When you were telling me your story about putting your hand on that doorknob and you getting that voice or hearing the voice, you not being a believer at the time, feeling like you had to have evidence, but you completely heard a voice speaking those words that you told us. what did you think that was at the time? Did you feel comforted knowing it was God? Or
I get a little emotional talking about it. I apologize for that. But I knew in the blink of an eye when I heard it who it was and what it was all about.
Yeah.
I knew it was God. All the evidence that
you
I needed
to know.
Yeah, because that conversation, Erika, is as real with my daughter, who wasn't even home, as you and I are having this one right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I was convinced, buddy, you need some evidence. Again, that, what got me there was, me not ever understanding why me, because a lot of people don't wind up on the same side of the results that I was fortunate enough. And Gary Morgan, about 2-3 years ago, I don't recall, just said, gave a sermon, and he talked about, when you knock, I will answer. And he went through some scriptures. When you seek, you will find. And man, it just hit me like a ton of bricks, right? Because back then I was reading those books that were given to me. I was reading scripture. I was praying to a God I didn't believe in.
Right.
But I was seeking him, right? Mm-hmm. I was knocking, so to speak, for a consistent period, probably 2 or 3 weeks, every day, several times a day, with a doubtful heart. And that's what I would just encourage people that were in the same boat that I was in, right? Down and out, whatever your mountains are.
They're not too big.
Yeah.
They're never too big. They may feel too big, and Satan likes to make us think that they are too big, and that's the only way out. But God is much bigger. We're going to take a brief moment away from this podcast and tell you about our sponsor for today. It's Blue Diamond Roofing Construction. It's actually my husband, Erika Williamson. He is a man of God who loves to serve people. And honey, tell us what sets you apart of other roofers or other construction. Tell us about that.
Well, we are not the roofers that are going to come and knock on your door and harass you, wanting to sell you something that you don't need. We are going to look out for your best interest, what's going to work best for your house, your income, whatever. We have different levels of materials, shingles. We do windows, gutters, painting, siding, flooring. Basically anything that you need at your home, we can handle for you.
Okay. How are we going to reach you?
Well, you can call our office at 469-360-1578. You can email us at ericbdrc@gmail.com.
That's Eric with a K.
Yes, Eric with a K. Yep. Yep. To come out and take a look or give an estimate, there is no charge for that.
Okay.
If you have emergency repairs where you have a storm, a tree falls, you've got a hole in your roof, whatever, you can call us. We have 24 hour, 7 day a week emergency repairs.
Awesome. All right. Might take us away from our chicken dinner, but hey, he's there to serve. Thanks, everybody. We'll put the contact information in the show notes. And thanks, honey, and back to our show today.
Yeah, so, how did that end that day? When I heard that, I immediately began sobbing.
I bet.
Quit looking for my daughter.
Yeah.
Right? Which was some kind of a relief, knowing that she's accounted for, she's in school. And I went to the side of my bed at 45 years of age, hit my knees, still sobbing, and surrendered it all. I told God, and I recall the conversation. God, I've stumbled, broke my nose so many times in 45 years, it's not funny. I lay it at your feet, my marriage, my children's choices, my attitude, my faults. And, so I just surrendered it all at his feet that day. And, the subsequent days were not near as bad. I kind of looked forward to getting up and not worrying about so much, because I had a totally different heart and mindset, which I'm extremely grateful
So then
for.
you became excited about your life then. It turned from excitement from that false leading of Satan to knowing God was real and being completely excited about what's God got for me next, right?
Yeah.
Just to continue seeking him and to continue looking for him. And I wanted to add to that, I love that, a lot of people, and they even come to me and they'll say, how do you know God's talking to you? And people talk about, You know, sometimes it's in an idea. Sometimes it's a voice. I mean, out of all the times I've heard God speak to me, it's sometimes prayer and I get an answer sometimes within minutes, sometimes never, sometimes, but the audible voice I've heard less than a handful of times. But no matter how we hear from him, we know it. And we can trust that he's speaking to us. And another thing is that you went to God not really knowing the words to say. And I want listeners to know it's not about the perfect words to say.
Exactly.
It's that I remember telling Eric, you know, in the beginning of our, you know, relationship, I said, you know, he was telling me a story of things. And I said, you know, you can yell at God. And he had never heard that. And he still tells that to people today because he thought, well, how disrespectful. And I said, God doesn't care how you come to him. He just wants you to come to him.
Amen.
So no matter how you do it, God already knows your heart, and he's just waiting for you to surrender just like you did.
Yeah. And, you know, to that point, Erika, sometimes it takes knuckleheads like me literally get knocked to your knees before, I guess, he gets a little attention. And you're so desperate, you're looking for help. And so you reach out and to your point, there is no right or wrong way to talk to God, right?
Right.
Normally on my commute, wherever I'm going, if I've got to drive in front of me, I'll turn the radio off and I'll talk. I don't have to have my eyes closed. I don't have to have the perfect words. We just have a conversation, right? Mostly one-sided. Lord, you know, here's what I'm up against, and you know it, and thank you for all my blessings. Praise his name. But, you know, the whole point of this being, Erika, is that I went through some heavy trouble there, and financial was always chasing us, right? Financial issues at certain points. And here's what I do know, that once we surrendered it, the only reason my family's still intact is because I surrendered to Christ. I had that collision with the cross.
Yep.
And that Christ cared enough about me, even though I wasn't doing and saying the right things. It wasn't perfect, you know, but I was seeking him. He wants a relationship with us, right?
That's right.
He doesn't want to hear from us just occasionally.
Right.
And for me, when I look back on that, I guess I was trying to create a relationship, even though I was doubtful heart and not knowing the words to say. But to your point, there's no right or wrong words. God doesn't care how you come to him. He does want you to come to him often. He wants you to read Scripture often. He wants you to pray often. And when you do that, I don't care what, you know, I've got some family members that I've talked to that have a little uphill battle, and you know, one of them happens to be atheist, and you know, I've talked to them at length, and I still try to encourage them. And all I've encouraged them to do, Erika, is this: just what I did. Do it consistently for a couple, 3-4 weeks. Seek, pray to a God that you may not believe in. Mm-hmm. Read. Investigate, whatever you want to call it, but just be persistent and consistent. Yeah. And I think if they do that, you know, God will reveal themselves in a way similar to mine, right? And go at it with a doubtful heart. I don't even care if you totally don't believe. Mm-hmm. Do it, right? One of my favorite all-time movies in the book that I read, one of the first books Brother Rick McKenzie gave me, was The Case for Christ with Lee Strobel. Mm-hmm. And you know, that's, if you haven't seen it or read it, you got to see the movie or watch. I like the book because it gets a little more detailed about who he talked to, and, you know, theologians across the world, and physicians who's dealt with near-death experiences, you know, and being able to testify that the only way that person's still alive is a miracle by God, because there's no medical reason why they're still here. They should be dead.
Love it.
And so, you know, that Lee Strobel, I don't know if I want to bust everybody's adventure on what it's about, but, you know, Lee Strobel was bent on disproving Christianity. Yeah. And that's what he set out seeking to do. And in his studies, in the end, he wound up giving his life to Christ. So
yeah.
It's a phenomenal book and a true story, obviously.
Alvin, I just want to ask you, for listeners out there that may be in that situation and find themselves caught up in that lie from Satan, what's a word of encouragement or something that you could just bless people with for listeners to hear today?
You know, what I would encourage them to do is don't stop, right? I don't care how doubtful they get. If they are persistent in pursuing God, a relationship with Christ, he's going to reveal himself to them. You just got to have that consistency involved. And I don't even care if it's a doubtful heart. And I'll tell you how I know this isn't just some kind of a whim and because from that point on in my life, and it wasn't just my life, Erika, it was my family's life. God has blessed us beyond belief. So when God gets involved with your life, when you go seeking him, religiously seeking him, and you're praying with a doubtful heart, all I ask you to do is be consistent and stay after it. And if you do that, God may not answer your problems tomorrow or next week, but I promise you, if he sees that there's a change in your heart and that you're really seeking and you need some kind of evidence, he's going to give you the evidence that you need, just like he gave me. Mm. So it's that persistency, even if it's a doubtful heart or a non-believing heart, go try to find it. And if nothing else, like Lee Strobel, try to disprove it. Yeah. And do it with some consistency like Lee did, and the vast, research that he did to discover, and surrender. Because I'll tell you, my family's still intact. My wife and I will celebrate our 34th wedding anniversary coming up here in just 4 days,
and
September
I'm so grateful.
6th.
I'm grateful.
God's blessed both of my children with college graduation. My latest, Savannah, with honors the last few semesters, coming out of nursing, and I landed a job, back in 8 years ago, Erika, that my resume doesn't speak to. I promise you, right? So when God sees that you're a different person, and he'll come in and he'll bless. And thank God my family stood by me, right? Because there was a lot of times they could have bailed and should have bailed. But they didn't. So, I'm where I am today. My family's still intact where we are today, thanks to the Ellis County Cowboy Church, more to Jesus Christ. Yeah. But, we've got a great team here at our church that preach the truth, and is willing to work with you outside, those hours to try to make a difference in your life with a Christ-centered life. And if you just pay a little attention, man, it's amazing where you may wind up. So
there's nothing better than being in, like you're saying, being in an amazing church like that, where you feel like you can grow and you feel comfort. It's where you find your guidance and your comfort and your peace. And God, we weren't made to do life alone. And that's another reason why church is so important, because you find your people that you can go to with no matter what is going on in your life, and they're going to love you anyway. Yeah,
exactly. And you're right. I know people that say I don't have to go to church. Maybe you don't, but you should. Yeah. Right? And here's why. We need to go to church. And even though I've had the most incredible godly experience and interaction with Christ, I actually heard Christ talk to me, right? Mm-hmm. It's still sometimes, if I don't stay plugged up and plugged in to other believers or to church, or, I've been a lay pastor in my church for a while. Here at Cowboy Church, we got to take some burdens off our pastors about, weddings, marrying some folks, and maybe doing a funeral, and kind of helping pray with folks after services and whatnot. So I've been a lay pastor for quite a while now, and absolutely love it. And a lot of times I can go in, somebody will ask for some prayer, and I'll go in and pray with them. And more times than not, when I come out of that scenario, I feel more blessed than they do. I mean, it's amazing.
That's Eric and I always say, us going to church is, yes, amazing and great, and you should go. It's going to bless you, but serving is where it's at. Yeah. You set out to serve other people, but you're blessed 10 times, and you don't do it for that reason, but you find that in serving. And
and the more you're plugged up and around those kind of people, the more desire you have to serve, right? Sure. And God calls us all to be disciples of his word, right? Exactly. And to exemplify his life, right? And set by example. So, Christ didn't just pray for people, right? Christ didn't just stay at home and kind of keep to himself. Yeah. He got out and he mingled and he prayed, and, he wanted to see, all that he could and spread the word. And so I think that's the other part of it too, is, sometimes that word serve, kind of bothers people. Well, you're asking me to do what now? Yeah. I don't know. But, to me, I think if you, be able to sit down across the table from Christ and say, you know, what is it you want me to do?
Exactly.
He's got a list for you.
Yeah.
And it's all of what we're talking about, right? Is come together in numbers and go out and serve those that are around you and love everyone just as if you love yourself, right? So I think we're tasked with a number of things that Christ has us do. So, you know, if you really want to draw closer to Christ, because here's why I say all of that, is if I don't go to church for a while, or I don't dig into that scripture in a day or two, then I start slipping back to the old guy Alvin was. And let me tell you something, that's a guy I don't want to go back and visit, honestly. But even with my incredible experience, if I don't stay plugged up, I start losing track of all that we just talked about. So it's extremely important, in my opinion, that you have to stay plugged in and plugged up.
I agree.
Otherwise, you're going to wind up back on that slippery slope. You're going to wind up right back in that ditch you came from, even though mine was 13 years ago now. And that's what will happen. I'll start shunning God, and then, you know, he's quite frank and talking about, you know, you want to pray, and that's the way you've been.
Yeah.
I don't think I know you.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
So,
no, it's true. It's all true. I feel the exact same way.
You got to stay plugged up.
And what a legacy you're leaving for your, you know, just that you're leading, not leaving, but leading for your wife, being the head of household, the spiritual leader of your home and your children. I mean, I know because I've known Savannah since she was 15. She's just a beautiful human being, and we're so grateful that she's going to, you know, she's already our family, but it'll be on paper when they get married. But we're so grateful for all of that. And it's really started with you in that encounter, and God just blessed all of it.
Well, let me reciprocate that with, you know, we're grateful what she's got on the other side too, right? With you and Eric. So we know what kind of stock you guys are, and we're grateful for that as well. All I can say is it all starts with a choice.
It does.
Every day we wake up, we've got choices. You know, do I want to put on shorts or jeans or tennis shoes or boots, right? And it goes from there. And, you know, the choice to make a difference and be a difference can only start with you. You want a different life? You want a different outcome? Do you want a different view? You got to change something about it, right? That's insanity. You get up and do the same things over and over and expect different outcomes. You got to change something. And so I'm grateful because it you know, I'm grateful for my collision, but it has kind of shadowed out to my family, which I'm extremely grateful for. I just hope they stay plugged up as often as they should be. Yeah. And we'll happy
all team up.
Yeah, we're hoping you guys are on the other side. So.
We'll all team up for that. Awesome. Well, I just I'm so honored that you were able to come by here today and share your story. Like I said, when I heard it, I just couldn't believe it, from knowing you all those years, and I didn't know anything about that. And just to understand and learn the kind of man that you are and who you've become. So thanks again.
You bet. Last thing I want to say is, you know, if we wait until we think we're good enough, you know, there's some things I need to change before I try to get lined up with God.
True.
We're never going to go to God.
True.
Right? So God accepts us who we are. We fall short every single day. We're sinners. Thank God He's a forgiving God. He's willing to forgive us day after day after day, sometimes whatever, right? So I just want to really, really try to inspire those folks out there that's probably going through some difficult times with this craziness going on in the world and the hatred going on in it and this virus running around, get everybody scared. You know, God is still on the throne.
He is.
And He's going to remain on the throne. And you want some hope. You want to get rid of some of this, you know, fear and everything. Just lean on God, and He's going to get us all through it. We can't lose when we got Him. So
I love it. That's true. Alvin, thanks so much for stopping by today and sharing your story. If you'd like to know more about Amazing Grace Retreats, you can check that out on amazinggraceretreat.org. If you like the podcast today, please write a good review and share on your social media. Please subscribe on your favorite platform. Thanks again, and we'll see you again next time on Amazing Grace Talk.